Hello and welcome to Fart Notes. I'm Isadora, and this is part one of Interview with the Vampire. Now, she did not really go with like a traditional like chapter, chorus, verse, bridge structure. If you feel me and you know what I'm saying, all right? So we already did part one. If you did not catch up on that, do it, man. I got a whole playlist. So because there isn't a traditional like chapter structure, I'm just going to where like the page breaks are, I guess. You know what I'm saying? In part two of like this whole part one, we really get into like how fucked up the different relationships are, all right? And look, like, I'm taking notes. I got my bone pens. That's a wine opener. Don't worry about it, all right? Chapter one, if you forget, it basically ends with the banger line, "That's how I became a vampire." So in one, we kind of have Louis going from man to vampire we get into these family dynamics, these family relationships. Again, like, there is a lot of violence and a lot of blood within this book. But the real horror is like the relationships between the characters and how they torment each other. And often that's kind of what like monsters serve in literature. Like, it's not just like spooky, scary skeletons. It's like the intergenerational trauma of the spooky, scary skeletons. Chapter two, part two begins, "And there you were," said the boy after a pause, "with another vampire you hated. But I had to stay with him," answered the vampire. So I just put classic. Like, in this, you really see, like, pure codependency of, like, a toxic relationship explored through, like, immortality and vampirism. Honestly, after rereading this book, I would say in the movie from the 90s with like Kirsten Dunst and Brad Pitt, one of my main criticisms of it was like, it seems like Louis and Lestat do not even fuck with each other, and Lestat just picked him so he could live in his house. And like, that seems very canonically accurate. Like, ooh, this is rough, brother. Anyway, so we kind of get into like the dynamics of the relationship, where it's basically a power struggle in which Louis has like the material and financial things which Lestat requires. Lestat claims this is only to take care of his like dying father, but like, brat prince, living bougie, color me fucking shocked beyond measure, okay? Kind of Lestat holding it over Louis that like, I'm the only one you have on Earth now, I'm the only vampire you know, I'm the only one who can teach you the shit that you need to know. So like, very interesting like power struggles between them. Here in my notes, I just have like sugar daddy Louis, and we kind of get sometimes Louis will begrudgingly compliment Lestat. Sometimes he'll like literally throw it. He'll be like, "Oh, you know, he had impeccable taste, though my library to him was a pile of dust. And he seemed more than once to be infuriated by the sight of my reading a book or writing some observations in a journal. That's immortal nonsense," he would say to me, while at the same time spending so much of my money to splendidly furnish Pointe that even I, who cared nothing for the money, was forced to wince. So like, that's kind of crazy to have like a sugar baby that you hate. But then we kind of get into like the duality of man, the duality of Lestat. So like, Louis like, "Lestat treated me like absolute shit, but he was very pleasant to like any of the guests who came. When there would be like other planters of New Orleans, other people coming down the river. So he would say he was a huge dick to me. But like, and in entertaining visitors at Pointe du Lac, those hapless travelers who came up the river, to those Lestat was so gentle and polite that it made things far easier for me, who found myself hopelessly locked to him and jarred over and over by in his viciousness." And the boy, Daniel Malloy, is like, "Yeah, but didn't Lestat like kill and harm these people who came through?" And Louis is like, "Oh yeah, totally, but let me tell you a little secret. I would rather see somebody die than see them be the object of rudeness under my roof," which like isn't it really, like, isn't it a lot ruder to end somebody's life than to, like, treat them a little shitty? Actually, this is very interesting. I feel like Anne Rice did a lot of research into, like, the norms of the past amongst, like, nobility and stuff. Like, there's a lot of super archaic notions of, like, hospitality and, like, what it means to host somebody in your home that, like, we can find a lot in, like, older literature, whether we're talking about, like, these conventions in terms of, like, how they should be enacted, which you'll find more in, like, Jane Austen books, or, like, the perversion of these, like, ideas, which you can see in something like Shakespeare's Macbeth, where, like, Lady Macbeth does, like, a whole song and dance to prepare to, like, host Duncan well under her roof, so, like, nobody talks about how she's, like, a shitty hostess or, like, doesn't have the things she needs, but then kills the shit out of Duncan. So, like, in my notes, I just have, like, kind of relating to these, like, archaic notions of hospitality, and I think, like, Anne Rice did a lot of research into, like, how somebody culturally might be, like, in, like, an old world setting, you know? Which is, like, very different from now. Like, you see all these memes today where it's, like, you crash at your homie's house and you end up sleeping under a used pizza box. Like, that would not fly back in the day, my homies. So... yeah, we're really exploring the duality of Lestat, though. So, like, Louis is, like, he was rude to me, and he was, like, either super, like, overly kind and generous with his dad, or, like, super cruel to the old man as he lay dying. And, like, but meanwhile, he was very, very kind to, like, all of the guests that came through the house, and Lestat loved, like, chilling with them and entertaining them and whatever. Very lady of the manor of you, Lestat Macbeth. Anyway, yeah, so he's like, he would buy his father, he would push luxury upon him to almost a ludicrous point. The old blind man must be told constantly how fine and expensive his bed jackets and robes were. So, like, this is just so dark and gothic and miserable. Like, Lestat was spending all of this money, like, on, like, beautiful, fine things that his blind father couldn't even see. Meanwhile, he was treating him like shit, you know, but then at other times, he would bully the old man. He would erupt into such rage that the old man whimpered like a child. "Don't I take care of you in baronial splendor?" Lestat would shout at him. "Don't I provide for your every want? Stop whining to me about going to church or old friends. Such nonsense. Your old friends are dead. Why don't you die and leave me and my bankroll in peace?" Yeah. So, like, he would have these, like, angry screaming fits followed by, like, fits of near obsequious kindness, where he would, like, feed him patiently and talk about the weather, like... And in my notes here, I just have setting up Lestat as a constant battle of, like, contrasts, our BPD princess. And I think in here we have a lot of, like, excellent hints at, like, the richness of the characters in the universe in terms of these, like, very different ways that Lestat treats, like, everybody around him. Again, like, it is very common in, like, BPD narcissism, different things, to, like, treat strangers kindly and, like, people on the outskirts well, but, like, your inner circle, they be getting beat down. Yeah, then we have a lot of, like, Lestat teasing Louis. Like, they kind of have, like, Louis is like, "Am I am the devil? What's happening to me? Wah, wah, wah." And, Lestat, you know... Lestat would taunt me with sealed lips when I asked about God or the devil. "I'd like to meet the devil some night," he said once with a malignant smile. "I'd chase him from here to the wilds of the Pacific. I am the devil." Like, Lestat's just always fucking with him all the time. Like, I can't tell if, like, Lestat is one of those people who's, like, very bantery in, like, relationships. Like, he's kind of sassy, but, like, Louis takes everything, like, deeply personally, and I think that's one thing that, like, they really cannot come together over. Like, Lestat is, like, lighter, you know, he's the get hit 9 times, come back up 15 king, okay? Like, he's kind of, like, giggling his way through life, just seeing, like, what it brings him, and Louis takes everything as, like, a deep personal offense. Yeah, then we kind of get these more interesting kind of, like, character exploration of Louis, who says, like, it kind of seems like he only really comes to appreciate the mundanity and like the beauty of human life once he loses it. You know, he says, it was detachment that made this possible, a sublime loneliness with which Lestat and I moved through the world of mortal men, and all material troubles passed from us. I should tell you the practical nature of it. But again, Louis talks a lot about like how like vampiric detachment has like completely changed his perspective and way of living, and Homeboy is still deeply embedded in mortal affairs that literally have nothing to do with him. Like, not even in his family. Like, so I think he's trying to, like, he's one of those dudes who's like, I don't feel anything anymore. I haven't felt anything since the war. Meanwhile, he's, like, openly weeping in a closet or, like, punching holes in walls, you know what I'm saying? Louis has a lot, he's just straight shit-talking Lestat. So he's like, I suspected that beneath his gentleman's veneer, he was painfully ignorant of the most simple financial matters. But I was not, and so he could acquire cash at any moment, and I could invest it. If he were not picking the pocket of a dead man in an alley, he was at the greatest gambling tables in the richest salons of the city, using his vampire keenness to suck gold and dollars and deeds of property from young planters' sons who found him deceptive in his friendship and alluring in his charm. So, like, Louis basically, like, yeah, like, he knew how to steal money, but he didn't know how to manage it. So, like, he literally just picked me to, like, manage all his shit. Now, I find this really interesting. I'm in my notes here. I put, capitalism is more powerful than vampirism, SMH, brother. Then we have just, like, these magical, detailed descriptions of, like, cast of New Orleans that really, really take you there, and, like, all the people who were there and why they were there, from, like, natives, Europeans, like, people brought in as slaves, like, Irish and German immigrants, like, yeah, have free people of color, like, and just, like, everything they brought to the city and the atmosphere they gave it. You know, he says, this was New Orleans, a magical and magnificent place to live, in which a vampire, richly dressed and gracefully walking through the pools of light of one gas lamp after another, might attract no more notice in the evening than hundreds of other exotic creatures, if he attracted any at all. Like, the way she writes is just beautiful, and it's so, like, it's so sexy, like, genuinely. Yeah, so then we get back to, like, yes, money. Lestat and I had to make money. So here's the thing, like, Louis is saying, like, Lestat's a total dumbass. But again, like, he's also saying Lestat realized the skills he didn't have and brought somebody into the fold who had those skills to give him, like, an elevated lifestyle. I mean, Lestat doesn't sound like a dumbass to me, baby girl. But, yeah, it's just really pissing me off, honestly. He talks a lot about, like, how he and Lestat, like, managed money, how he's, like, a businessman, which I see how they brought into, Jacob Anderson's Louis du Pointe-de-Lac, much more than they did in, like, other adaptations I've seen. Yeah, then so we're also talking about, like, capitalism again, which is, like, interesting. We have, like, the vampirism through, like, the literal vampirism. Then we have the vampirism through, like, stealing money from people again. So we get into, Lestat loves, like, killing people every night, sometimes multiple people. Louis is only killing animals. We talk about, like, what Lestat's preferences are in terms of kills. So we got, you know, Lestat killed humans all the time, sometimes 2 or 3 a night, sometimes more. He would drink from one just enough to satisfy a momentary thirst, and then go in for another. The better the human, the more he liked it. A fresh young girl, that was his favorite for the first of the evening. But the triumphant kill for Lestat was a young man. A young man around your age would have appealed to him in particular. And then we get into, like, the interaction with the boy, and I'm just like, oh, like, imagine, that would give you chills if that was you. Me, the boy whispered. He had leaned forward on his elbows to peer into the vampire's eyes, and now he drew up. Yes, the vampire went on. You see, they represented the greatest loss to Lestat because they stood on the threshold of the maximum possibility of life. Of course, Lestat didn't understand this himself. I came to understand that. Lestat understood nothing. Again, like, I think Louis not getting it either. I think Lestat is reliving his, like, own trauma. Like, his preferred victims are, like, the mirror of him. So, like, you don't get it either, Louis. So on some level, Lestat is, like, reliving his own murder every night, which is insane. Okay, then we get into this. This is a long ass thing, but essentially, so we've already established that Lestat loves to kill like a young man, because he considers that, or Louis thinks that he considers them to be at like the prime of life, so he's taking the most from humanity. I think Lestat's like reliving his own murder every night. So then we get into this whole thing where again, Louis is like, we're like almost 40 pages in, Louis is constantly talking about his own fucking detachment, yet bro is not detached, let me tell you. Bro is lying. Bro, like, it's very interesting because he seems to have this thing where he's like, I understand like the depths of human and vampire spirit and what everything means, and Lestat is an idiot. He's like, Louis is like the original like, I'm an empath pioneer. Like, I could decide how people, I could be an empath too if I like decide how other people feel in my own head and then proclaim it's real, Louis. Anyway, so then we get into this like, this whole long drawn out thing that shows just Louis is invested, okay? So there's this dude, he's like of the Frenier family. He's like the son set to inherit like a vast plantation fortune and take care of like his family members. Louis has like become fascinated with one of his sisters named Babette. Now, Lestat decides that he wants to kill Frenier. Which, again, like, I think Lestat is, like, kind of, like, looking for men who are, like, a mirror of what he could have been and, like, destroying them. But Louis is like, oh, he's just doing it to fuck with this family. Because, like, I'm a fan. He's literally, Louis is, like, hiding in the dark in these people's houses, like, watching them without them knowing. Louis is, like, the K-pop stan of the Freniers, okay? They're both hunting the Frenier plantation to eat. Lestat is hunting for slaves and chicken thieves, and him for animals, and he kind of, Louis develops a fascination with, like, just, like, silently viewing this family, and Lestat decides that he wants to kill the Frenier son who's set to, like, take care of the whole family, but Louis is like, you can't do it, because I stan Frenier, because I'm so detached and cold, and I have, like, perfect vampire clarity of mind. He gives, like, Jordan Peterson vibes, like, who's, like, you know, I understand, like, the ultimate workings of, like, what gives you meaning in life, and he's, like, in a medically induced coma in Russia to get off benzos, like, alright. So, like, Louis kind of goes into this whole thing where he's like, you know, I felt for them totally. Their position was agonizing, and I felt for the boy, because I'm their son, so he's, like, set to inherit all this shit and keep the family running. He also gets involved in a duel with like a young Spanish Creole, and Louis says the whole thing was nothing really, but like most young Creoles, this one was willing to die for nothing. They were both willing to die for nothing. The Frenier household was in an uproar. So like, and he's like in this and how he's trying to save Frenier, and Daniel just roasts the fucking shit out of Louis, and he's like, okay, but toward all this you had detachment, distance. And I wrote, bro has no detachment. Bro is like the anti-Buddha. Bro develops attachments to everything so intense that he becomes immediately insane. So like there's this whole duel, and like Lestat basically wants to kill Frenier before he can get through the duel, in case like the Spanish Creole kills him. Lestat gets his man anyway, even though Louis intervenes. It's like a whole mess, and they get into a whole fight about it, because they're just always bitching and fighting at each other. Louis gets in the way, even though he doesn't fully succeed, and like Frenier still dies. Lestat is like, if I didn't like the life of a southern planter, I'd finish you tonight. I know a way. So Louis is like, no, being a vampire for Lestat meant revenge. Revenge against life itself. Every time he took a life, it was revenge. It was no wonder then that he appreciated nothing. Yeah, Louis just thinks he's like, it's very interesting because like Louis does paint this picture of like an almost wholly contemptible person, but also Louis just seems to hate everything so much that it makes you wonder like, how real is this? You know what I'm saying? Which is cool, like establishing the unreliable narrator. So then, alright, so the whole family of the Freniers is like waiting for news, and Louis decides to do some like Ghost of Christmas Past type shit with like Babette. Now the thing is, the Frenier boy who was killed was like the only son, and back in these days it really wasn't accepted for like women to take hold of like businesses independently. But Louis basically does some like Ghost of Christmas Past shit to Babette, and he like appears and he's like you gotta run everything yourself. I'm like the ghost of Christmas past. Do what the fuck I tell you to do. And Daniel interrupts all of this to basically talk about how beautiful Louis is and like wonder if he was as handsome of a man in life. Very gay. Like Daniel is not focusing on the task at hand. He's just like, this boy, hot as shit, brother. So yeah, Louis, who is completely detached, no longer cares about mortal affairs, blah, blah, blah. He decides to, after trying to interfere in the duel between Frenier and the Spanish Creole, he appears like some Mufasa shit, like face in the clouds to Babette, and he's like, even though you're a bitch and they're gonna say you can't run this plantation, you a bad bitch and you can run it. And she's like, all right, and she does it, and then like becomes the scandal of the town for being like a woman who's like running an entire plantation by herself. Again, like all of these people are slave owners, so I'm like not exactly girl bossing, rooting for Babette or whatever. I just kind of think it's like very funny that Louis talks a lot about his like vampiric detachment and clarity of mind, and he's like literally like deeply embedded in this family that has nothing to do with them, you know? So then after all that shit, they come back to Pointe, and after they had this whole fight about how like they want to get rid of each other or whatever, Daniel is like, hey, like, so about you and Lestat, like, are y'all still living together? And Louis was like, yes, I could not be certain. He told me all I needed to know. Like, this is just so classic of like toxic relationships where like one person like clearly don't like each other, but they both need each other for external things and both lack the will to like exit the toxic relationship. So then we get into this like kind of, I just thought this was funny, so I'm gonna read it to you. In my notes I put LMAO. Daniel was like, oh, what about like your families and your sisters and your mom, whatever, and Louis was like, oh yeah, I just gave everybody, I entrusted large amounts of money to my sister and her husband to invest. Fortunately, her husband was an idiot, a harmless one, but an idiot. The product of 4 generations of marriages between first cousins. Like, Monterey vibes. Sweet Home Alabama, baby. So yeah, Louis like, yeah, even though like we hated each other, we still lived together, like stuff was chillin', whatever. But then we started having like issues with the slaves after about 4 years of relative quiet, investing, increasing our lands, purchasing apartments and townhouses. So yeah, he's saying, you know, he refers to all of the stuff as like our things, like belonging to him and Lestat, but then he's like, oh wait, actually that's wrong. I never signed anything over to Lestat, and as of then I was still legally alive. But he talks about, like, it's very interesting. So he talks about the issues they're having with the slaves that eventually kind of destroy everything. He says, in 1795, these slaves did not have the character which you've seen in films and novels of the South. They were not soft-spoken, brown-skinned people in drab rags who spoke an English dialect. They were Africans, and they were islanders. You know, they were very black. They spoke the French patois. They sang African songs. They were superstitious and had their own secrets and traditions. In short, they had not yet been destroyed as Africans completely. Slavery was the curse of their existence, but they had not been robbed yet of that which had been characteristically theirs. Damn. No, I honestly, like, this is actually very interesting, because I feel like what he is talking about a lot, it's like when you see, like, slaves depicted in films, they're always, like, docile and dumb and, like, childlike in their depictions. This is what I'm talking about in terms of, like, older films. It's kind of interesting to see him talk about, like, the reality of them and, like, their culture as he would have experienced it. Yeah, and he said, I'm Lestat and I slept in real danger. The slaves knew now we were not ordinary mortals. In hushed tones, the maids told of how, through a crack in the door, they had seen us dine on empty plates with empty silver, lifting empty glasses to our lips, laughing, our faces bleached and ghostly in the candlelight. A blind man, a helpless fool in our power. Through keyholes, they had seen Lestat's coffin. There is no bed in there, they confided to each other with nodding heads. He sleeps in the coffin, I know it. Yes, like, and they, basically, Lestat and Louis are, like, spying on the slaves to learn this, and, good for the slaves. Like, it's crazy how everybody else, like, all the white people in New Orleans and, like, everybody else is, like, stupid as fuck and unaware of what's happening. Like, these slaves slaves figure it out. Like, so like Louis's like, we need to do something, we need to leave. And Lestat is just like, I'll just kill them all. In threes and fours, some will run away, and that will be fine. Okay, yeah, then Louis and Lestat are having a fight again. Louis's like, I'm gonna get rid of you, and Lestat's like, you're a whining coward vampire who prowls the nights killing alley cats. And Louis is like, I'm gonna get rid of you. You don't know anything. And you being reckless has endangered us both. He says, but you must have all the things you never had of life and make of immortality a junk shop in which both of us become grotesque. Incredible. Now, meanwhile, as the slaves are realizing that they're monsters, Lestat's father is like, on his last leg. Like, bro is dying for real, okay? So, like, the slaves are uprising. Lestat's father is screaming and crying as he dies. Like, and he's calling out for Lestat, and Louis says the sound of him crying was terrible. And Louis is like, go deal with your dad who's dying. Go talk to him. He's calling for you. And Lestat literally picks out a nail file and starts filing his fucking nails instead of, like, engaging with him. Then, Lestat and, like, so, like, Lestat's kind of father is, like, begging him for forgiveness, and Lestat is like, I don't know what you're talking about, and Louis is like, I was running out of fucking patience. Then, one of the slaves kind of sees what's going on, and, like, he sees, which is an incredible reveal and, like, an incredible scene. He sees the reveal of, like, the fanged vampire teeth, and Louis kills him, but by stabbing him with a knife. He basically takes the knife, the slave has to defend himself, and Louis says, I took it from him easily and slipped it into his heart. He sank to his knees at once, his fingers tightening on the blade, bleeding on it. And the sight of blood, the aroma of it maddened me. I believe I moaned aloud. Like, Jesus Christ. So then we get into, like, long descriptions of, like, the death of Lestat's father, and this has one of my favorite lines of all time. Anne Rice describes him as, like, a living corpse. Like, Louis even feels bad for the old man and gives him his hand, and the old man thinks that, like, he's Lestat, and he says, this was the slow decay, the body refusing to surrender to the vampire of time, which had sucked upon it for years on end. And I'm just like, that's a fucking banger of a line. I just put in my notes, like, Jesus Christ. Okay? So, like, Louis is actually pretending to kind of be Lestat to comfort, like, the old man because Lestat won't do shit. Then, finally, when Lestat comes through to, like, assume his place, Louis says, the real Esau came through the door. I don't know how you say that, if it's Esau or Esau, but basically, this is referring to the biblical story of Jacob and Esau. There's this Old English saying, it's like to sell your country for, like, a pot of porridge or, like, pottage or something, and it's basically referring to him, even though Esau was the oldest and Jacob was younger, so Esau is supposed to inherit, like, lands and, like, the birthright of his father and shit, and Jacob tricks Esau out of it. So we're just getting, like, deep in the biblical references. I feel like, honestly, I learned a lot about the Bible by reading Anne Rice. And that's how she would have wanted it. So in here, then we get really into, like, the cycle of terrible family interactions. So, like, Lestat is begging for Louis to kill his father. And Louis is like, no, you forgive him or you kill him yourself. Go on, kill your own father. So, like, reverse, like, Saturn eating a son type vibes or whatever. Then we have this whole conversation where, like, Lestat Sr. is like, you were the Joseph among your brothers. You were the best of them. But how was I to know? Again, we're talking here, like, Joseph in the Technicolor dream coat. Like, his brothers betrayed him and got rid of him because they were jealous, and, like, then he, like, gets, like, the prophetic dreams and, like, becomes, like, the Pharaoh's right-hand bro. I'm a biblical scholar, as you can tell. Yeah, and finally, like, even Lestat, like, there is kindness in Lestat, and finally he goes, it's all right, father, you must rest easy. I hold nothing against you, he said, his voice strained over his anger. So then Lestat finally just says, like, kill my father, please, like, I can't do it. And Louis says, the old man never even knew what happened. He never awoke from his stupor. I bled him just enough, opening the gash so he would die without feeding my dark passion. So, like, again, like, we have this absolutely horrifically toxic relationship between Lestat and his father. We talk a little bit in this chapter about how, like, Lestat's brother, like, wouldn't let him, like, go to school and, like, destroyed all his books and, like, kind of ruined his life. So we kind of see Lestat's father as, like, a horrible father, which, like, if we're looking at the cycle of trauma, Lestat is technically the parental figure of Louis. So we have, like, the generational trauma being passed down, but, like, through eternity, which is delightful. Yeah, so then after the old man is killed, Louis just starts burning down his entire manor, and while Lestat is after the slaves, and he would leave such ruin and death behind him that no one could make a story of that night at Pointe du Lac. Always before, his ferocity was mysterious, but now I bared fangs on the humans who fled from me, my steady advance overcoming their clumsy, pathetic speed as the veil of death descended. And Louis says, you know, oh, I've been keeping, like, wealth, a bunch of wealth safe just for this moment when we have to, like, escape. Then, like, in their final disappearance, like, Louis has to come to Babette one last time, even though it literally makes no sense and there's no reason to do that. And he gets them in trouble. They essentially get locked in a basement so he can have, like, a final conversation with her. Yeah, so then the boy is like, he's kind of like, they get into this weird thing where, he's like, Babette, the way you speak of her, said the boy, as if your feeling was special. And, like, Louis is like, did I give you the impression that I could not feel? Like, yeah, like, you keep saying that you don't feel anything anymore and you've, like, a clarity of mind and spirit, but, like, you become so profoundly attached to, like, random hoes. So, like, yeah, then they go into this, like, more like Louis does his favorite thing, which is to religious warble about, like, the nature of angels and God, whatever. But he says that he's really attached to Babette because she was, to me, in her own way, an ideal human being. And he says, you know, I feel love, and I felt some measure of love for Babette. No, though not the greatest love I've ever felt. It was foreshadowed in Babette. Again, this is really good writing because, like, it makes you interested. It gives you a reason to continue reading, to find out how the things develop. Also, something I want to point out in this page is, like, how, like, love, God, death, like, these very human things are kind of explored through the guise of the supernatural through Interview with the Vampire. You know, we have this thing where, like, aren't angels capable of love? Don't angels gaze upon the face of God with complete love? The boy thought for a moment. Love or adoration? What's the difference? Asked the vampire. So we have, like, love as adoration, love intertwined with violence, love intertwined with, like, selfishness. Like, just looking at how, like, love interacts in the universe. Then we have my fucking notes. So, like, he talks about, like, Louis was basically keeping tabs on Babette. Like, for years, he was like, on summer nights, I used to visit her, never letting her see me or know that I was there. I came to see that she was happy, and seeing her happy, I felt happiness as a result. And in my notes, I put, real detachment, buddy. Then we finally get into, like, Lestat and Louis fighting again. Very surprising, I know. And Louis finally goes, you know, you call me the idiot, and you've been the idiot all along. Do you think I don't know why you made me a vampire? You couldn't live by yourself. You couldn't manage even the simplest things. For years I've managed everything while you sat about making a pretense of superiority. There's nothing left for you to tell me about life. I have no need of you and no use for you. It's you who need me. So do we have, like, a reversal of the power structure? Like, the power struggle. Then we get into them, their whole page of them fighting. In my notes, constant power struggle. Then Lestat says, I only needed you as long as my father lived. He said, my father lived. And he said, now that he's dead, I won't put up with anything from you. I warn you. Yeah, and this is all where they're, like, locked in a basement in Babette's house, hiding from the sunrise. Yeah, then we kind of get into, like, the real tragedy of, like, vampiric existence here. So he was like, while they're essentially locked in, like, a cellar together to hide out the sun, and he says, I was thinking at that moment, wordlessly and rather deeply, how sublime friendship between Lestat and me might have been, how few impediments to it there would have been, and how much to be shared. But it's like, yeah, because of the way you both act, you guys are just not getting it together. They have, like, that classic, like, They act like an old married couple that hates each other, and it's been like 3 years. Yeah, so he's like, but my soul wanted to know Babette without my need to kill, without robbing her of every breath of life, every drop of blood. But Lestat, how we might have known each other, had he been a man of character, a man of even a little thought. The old man's words came back to me. Lestat, a brilliant pupil, a lover of books that had been burned. I knew only the Lestat who sneered at my library, called it a pile of dust, ridiculed relentlessly my reading, my meditations. Again, that's probably because of a result of what happened to him. I'm not saying it's like cool to like be a huge dickhead, but like I feel like Louis calls himself this like intensely like deep and thoughtful person who's like contemplating the very nature of life itself, but he fails to contemplate the very nature of the man beside him, you know? Yeah, then we just get more into like the feeling of self-doubt, keeping him in a toxic relationship where they just like fight all the time. Yeah, this is also, it really reminds me of like Dracula's Daughter, the old movie, which like inspired Anne Rice. We get a lot of Louis whining about like the tragedies of vampiric existence for a while. Then he tries to talk to Babette again, just like one-on-one, and like express his like affection and support for her, and instead he like accidentally ends up putting her in some kind of trance without even trying, and like he can't have that connection with her, which he wants to have because of like the very nature of what he is, which is deeply sad. One thing he says is like Babette, like all people, all strong people, she always suffered a measure of loneliness. So I think he kind of sees like a kinship with her and that, and he wants to reach out of her, but like because of his very nature, he can't. And like Lestat is like, bro, give it up. We gotta get the fuck out of here. And Louis is like, no, like I need to talk to her. And she like realizes like that he's like some kind of monster. And she's just like, get behind me, Satan. And tries to light him on fire and shit. It hurts. But so we kind of see Louis as like this guy who's like desperately reaching out for connection with others, but because of the very nature of what he is, he cannot receive or take part in that human connection, which he interestingly did not seem to have any interest at all when he was a man who could have just done that. I think it's more to do with like his innate nature as like a human being and his personality than his nature as a vampire, personally. Yeah, and he says, you know, you must understand that what I felt for Babette now was a desire for communication, stronger than any other desire, except for the physical desire for blood. Now we get just like hard, tragic, kind of like, so Lestat is like, Babette is to Louis, and she's like, you're the devil, you're doing all this. And he's like, suppose I told you I know nothing of the devil. And he says, you know, I don't know whether I come from the devil or not. I don't know what I am. I shouted at Babette, my voice deafening in my own sensitive ears. I am to live to the end of the world, and I do not even know what I am. Which, like, I mean, I'm supposed to live for a while, and I don't really comprehend the nature of my existence either. So, I feel it. Then she tries to light him on fire with a lantern, and Lestat actually saved his life. Even though, like, Lestat wanted to kill Babette, he's just down to kill anybody, you know what I mean? But then we get to the end of this section on page 63 right here. And it ends with, Lestat could kill and drink like a bolt of lightning, but I had saved only Babette's physical life. I was not to know that until later. So again, like, Louis, I'm guessing he, like, if he would have just left her alone, everything would have continued fine. But, like, because he did not, he drove her crazy. So we already have this, like, intense gothic interwoven narrative of like madness, death, bloodlust, destruction, twisting relationships. And again, that's cool foreshadowing as well. So now we have like foreshadowing of both like Louis having some hideous effect upon Babette and the effect of like the greatest love that he would like come to feel later. So anyway, I don't know, my bookmark dropped somewhere, so we're just going to do that for a second. But anyway, Thanks for getting to the end if you did. I'm Isadora, and this was Fart Notes. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me how you feel about this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!